On today's episode of Parenting Great Kids.
One of the biggest crimes as a parent we could commit is not allowing our kids to fail. They need to embrace failure because if they're not failing, they're not trying. And if you look at great success from business to sports, you have to fail.
This is Parenting Great Kids with Dr. Meg Meeker.
You spend 18 years teaching your kids how to tie their shoes, eat vegetables, and hopefully not microwave all their meals. And then they move out, and the late night, "Hey, Dad, how do I blank?" calls begin. Rob Finlay knows this phase well. He is the author of Hey, Dad, Everything You Should Have Learned About Life But Didn't. Thanks so much for joining me today, Rob. This is great because my kids have been through that stage too, and I got a lot of calls, and my husband got a lot of calls. And it made me realize sometimes I did too much for my kids. And I thought, why didn't I? So by the time, we have 3 daughters and a son. By the time my son came around, this guy started doing laundry at 14. He started doing this. And I think he did, pretty well with that. But you wrote this book after years of the classic Hey Dad calls. What finally made you say, all right, I need to put all of this in one place?
Sure. Well, it actually was started by a late night call. And I think as any adult with children would attest, those are the calls that you don't want. The middle of the night call. And it scared me. So I'm sound asleep, get the call, the phone is ringing, pick up. I see it's my daughter. I knew she was traveling. I'm like, what's wrong? That's always my first instinct. What's wrong? Said, hey, Dad, can I put the green gas in my Jeep? And I was like, my heart had to come down a little bit. I'm like, wait a second, like green gas in your Jeep. I'm trying to think. She's like, and of course she's like, yes, Dad, green gas in the Jeep. Can I put it in there? Like she's frustrated with me for trying to get clarification. Turns out she wanted to put diesel in her gas vehicle.
Did she know what diesel was?
She didn't. She knew that it was something that she just put in her car. She didn't really know. Now, fortunately, it was only because the nozzle didn't really fit perfectly that she called. Otherwise,
she would have ruined her car. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She would have ruined her car. And at this point, I was like, you know what? I remember, we as adults, we hang out with other adults and we all sort of talk about our kids and things. And so this was a common occurrence that we kept on hearing this stuff. But my wife, after that call, was like, you know what? You enjoy writing books. Why don't you write a book on all the stuff that the kids should have learned that either you didn't teach them, they didn't listen, or maybe, whatever it was, but try to put together this book to give them a foundation for when they get off that wheel, that they will have something that they can look at.
Yeah.
So that's what I did.
Practical. Like how often do you change the oil in your car? How do you change a tire? When should you call a doctor? When should you not? So many simple and practical things that you don't think about until you need to know. And I think that as parents, often we assume kids are picking up all of this stuff on their own, but they're really not because we're just doing it. Our kids aren't putting the gas in the car when we're out running errands. We are. Right. And we don't even think, there's 3 options here. There's 4 options here. Diesel, and this is what diesel does. So I think a lot of parents are like you and I, and they just assume that kids are picking up the skills. But clearly that isn't the case. So what are some of the most surprising gaps that you've seen in young adults and what they don't know?
Yeah. And just to clarify too, I think the purpose of this book was not to be like a 101, right? There's not a, how to do that. Cause the book to be an adult would be hundreds of thousands of pages, right?
Yeah.
This is meant to be sort of main core foundational concepts that I wanted to make sure that they understood. They don't have to understand the specifics, but understand the basics, right? Like first things first, what do you do now that you've graduated this life event? What do you do? How do you get a job? How do you get an apartment? How do you find a car? How do you become a good human and a good adult? And finally, what happens if, in banking and all this stuff, but also what happens when emergencies happen? So it was really a key of putting it all together. The other thing too is I actually went out and interviewed 30 experts in the field of things, such as a NASCAR race car driver and his crew chief on how to maintain a car, a woman who is an expert in cleaning on how many times should you really clean your sheets, which is surprising, how few kids sometimes do it, but everything in between, banking and all this stuff, because I really wanted to get everybody's perspective, and it was all under the same question.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to advise or give advice to your young adult or a young adult on this thing that you're an expert in, what would you tell them? And so that's how we got to it. Back to your original question, what were some of the amazing things that I've learned? One, I think that one of the biggest things is how difficult it is for a young adult to go from this transition from basically being a dependent to an independent. And I put this analogy, like I was just at the airport, and when you go in these long airports and they have these things, I call them the magic carpet ride, which is basically this, it's a motorized walkway.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like that. Our young adults are like that because they get on when they're young, and from first grade, second grade, third grade, so on, it's all sort of pre-programmed for them. And then all of a sudden they're at their gate.
Mm-hmm.
And now they don't know what to do. And my kids have struggled with that, as well as others, where they've thought they were going to do something when they graduated. Everything was all planned out for them, and now it wasn't.
Right.
And so they have to really sort of dig deep and try to figure out what they need to do. But more importantly, what we found is the biggest thing is a lot of them just don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
A lot of them just want to sort of, no, I don't want to grow up.
Mm-hmm. Where does that come from?
I think that comes from, probably an unpopular statement, but I think it comes from us as parents. I know I did. You were talking, you want to take care of your kids. You're assuming they're doing this stuff, but what? My girls were easy. I have 3 daughters and 1 boy. My son is the oldest, but I know my girls, if all they had to do is, Daddy, my car has a light on it.
Oh, yeah. I did that all the time. Yep. And then when I asked my husband, he said, no, you can fix it. I'm like, but my dad always fixed it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what dads, right? Dads have to have a purpose, right? And obviously we have a purpose, but it makes us feel good, right? I want to be needed. I want my girls to need me and my son to need me. And so I want to take care of stuff. And it also comes down to probably a little guilt. I spent a long time. My day job is besides being a parent, is also running businesses. And I started a business when I was very young, and I had to really take a lot of my time and attention to that business. And maybe I didn't do as much as I should have. And so there's probably a lot of guilt. So anytime my kids ask for something, of course I want to do it and want to take care of it for them. So I know I take blame for myself on having that, where my kids are maybe a little bit, it's a lot easier to text dad than it is to go and learn it yourself or do it yourself.
Oh, it is. And I think you bring up a great point, because I think that parents, in general, we want to be really, really good parents. And so we get very involved in our kids' lives, which often means doing a lot of things for them. One of my love languages is feeding people. I love to cook. And so whenever my kids come home, I have their favorite this, their favorite that, that's just what I love to do. But unfortunately, it doesn't always serve kids well when we, do too much for them. And so there's a balance there. I think you're right. Working parents who are away from their kids a lot do feel a guilt that we kind of need to make up for the time we weren't there. And so we often will overdo it. We'll, do way too many things for them. But also there's that identity part in there where we want to feel like really good parents. And in our mind, we feel like being a good parent means we do everything for our kids. And that's a dicey place to enter into parenting, and it's a hard one to pull away from. Was there a point in your parenting where you kind of had to pull away from doing things for your kids, or did you sort of pull away from doing those things when they were teenagers?
I think it was probably a little bit later. And I think it comes down, for me, it was about the experience, right? So having 4, right, you do things differently with the first one than you do with the 4th, right? And so, so I do believe that in many cases, my first one, I was very much making sure, but as you know, kids are different. Each one of your kids are different. So my first, I actually got lucky. He was all set, ready to go. He knew what he wanted to do. He got a job. He went out. The others, some not so much, each one is to their own. But I realize now, and especially doing this book and all these interviews and being more involved, I realize that this failure to get going is a real thing. And it really is something where we have done our kids a disservice. And I hear this a lot of times where people are like, well, you know what? I want my kids to have enough money so they can move out. And so I'm letting them stay at the house. And that's fine. Everybody has their own thing. But all you're doing, if you're still providing them their cell phone and their insurance and their car and all this other stuff, you're doing them a disservice because you're having them fail to launch and fail to go. There's never a right time to be launched, right? There's never enough time where you're going to have enough money. You're going to have the right job. You're going to have the right everything. And it really is up to the parents to have some tough love. And it is hard. You don't want to push your kid out into an apartment that isn't very nice, but they have to do it. Same thing with a job. A lot of times, one of my daughters graduated. She had a technical degree going into college, highly sought after when she was in college, and then the economy turns. And now that job's not available. She struggled to try to find identity and what was she going to do, compounded by probably one of the most evil things in our society, the social media sort of looking, trying to judge what's real and what's fake. And so she's looking at this saying, well, all these other people are getting jobs that are making huge amounts of money, and I can't really find a job. What's wrong with me?
Right.
So these are things that parents, but you still have to get them to say, hey, you know what? You still have to get out, get a job. I don't care what it is, but you have to get a job because you have to start earning money. You have to start living your life.
Yeah. And I think to teach kids that, all good things come from a big struggle. Like your daughter, you have to struggle and flounder and figure out, okay, I can't get a job. What do I do now? What do I do now? But to wait for everything to sort of line up, even a few things to line up before you feel you can be successful, almost guarantees you're not going to be successful. I hear young people always say, well, I'm not going to get married until I can afford a home. And I'm not going to have kids until I can afford, start putting money away from college. I said, that's ridiculous. You just go. And you figure it out as you go, because in that struggle is where you really end up at a good place. It's the struggle that gets you to that great spot. But we as parents just don't want our kids to struggle. I mean, we want them to have that nice apartment to move into, and the fact that we had to pay for it the first 6 months. Oh, well, we'll just do that. No, I mean, I think it's fine to help kids out, but you can say, I'll give you your deposit for the apartment, or I'll pay a third of it over the next 6 months, but it's really up to you to make it all work. Because life is so hard, and you have to figure out how to make things work, even if it's just not putting diesel in a gas gas tank. But it's really that struggle that is so terribly important.
Why do you think? I'm sorry, Dr. Meg, but why do you think kids are so programmed? Why do you think they are like this? Where it's everything. Like I'm going to have a kid when this happens or when this happens. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's fear. A lot of it's fear because they're afraid they're not going to be able to handle it or do it. My husband and I, we did everything kind of backwards. I had our first child when I was in medical school, fourth year medical school, and most of our colleagues weren't even married. And they looked at me like, you're crazy. I said, you know what? I just want kids. Whatever it takes, I'm just going to start having kids. And it was really, really hard. I think that, some of it's the kids and some of it is the parents. I think that we really, really want to make sure our kids' lives are okay and that they're happy and they're comfortable. And this keeps us from pushing them into failure. Because that's a very uncomfortable thing for a parent to watch their kids flounder and struggle. So I also think it's part of our identity as parents that if our kids do well, i.e. succeed and have that job, then we're good parents. But you feel like you're not a great parent if your kid's struggling and doesn't have a job. I mean, but it's not about us. It's really not about us. It's about our kids. And then I also think that kids kind of get complacent because they just feel like, they don't really need to do anything because why should they? I mean, everything's been given to them. So I think it's multifactorial, but it's definitely a very real thing. But a lot of what I found is fear, both on the parents' part and on the kids' part, to jump into a struggle.
Well, just look at college graduation time, right? Or college acceptance time, right? I've never seen more parents and more stress from not only parents, but these young adults when it's time. What school did you go to? What did he? Oh, Johnny got into this one. Oh, he must be really smart. Or he didn't get into that. Oh, geez. Oh, well, poor you. Well, maybe next year you'll be okay. That's too much pressure, right? It's like it doesn't matter what all of that is. It's just and you're back to that point where failure is not allowing our kids to fail. One of the biggest crimes as a parent we could commit. Kids need to fail. They need to embrace failure because if they're not failing, they're not trying. And if you look at great success from business to sports, you have to fail. Nobody just comes in and does it. Walmart, Sam Walton failed before he built Walmart. I mean, and it goes on and on.
Yeah, really, all good things end up after a huge struggle because there's a lot about the struggle that builds your character. Stand back up. And that's one thing my parents taught me is that, okay, you fall down, you didn't get in, stand back up. Go again and again and again, because that's how you get good at anything. Well, in your book, you talk about resumes to relationships to resetting circuit breakers. So where do parents start teaching life lessons before their kids leave home? I mean, you're right. There's 100,000 different things we could teach our kids, but at what age should you start to teach your kids practical things? And how do you at least get the big things covered before they leave home? Should you make a list?
Yeah, I think what you have to do is figure out what are the big ones, right? So that's a interesting statement. Which ones are big? Which one's more important than others, right? So I would start out with the first and foremost, for any parent who's listening, your high water mark, your bar is making sure that your kid or your young adult is a good human. Right. That's really to me, if you do that, right, they're a good human. They care about people. They're compassionate, they have empathy. They have motivation. They want to do so. Like that's all you need to do. That part, you're done. Now you start getting into the technical stuff. How can you help your kid get ahead and succeed in life? And I witnessed this not only from the past 25 years of hiring young adults into our program at work, but having my own kids. The skill and the importance of networking, the skill and the requirement to be able to talk to humans, not text, not Snapchat, but actual communication with adults and people that they don't know. And so I would say early on, I would highly recommend having your young adult or your child interact with other adults, not just you, not with grandma, grandpa, but other adults, getting them involved. Now, I'm not saying that they come out. We have friends of ours that have a young child and he's with them on every date night and everything. I don't think that's the right way.
Yeah.
But having them be in a situation where they have to communicate with other adults is important, because if you look, and if going back to the book, a lot of people said over and over again, one of the key components is networking, right? In order to get a job, you're not just going to go on LinkedIn or Indeed and click the easy button and get a job. That's not really going to how it's going to happen. You need to network. You need to learn how to meet people and how to talk to people. Next is heaven forbid, you're in a new environment. You're the people that used to connect you, your fraternity or sorority or your college roommates or your high school classmates, they might not exist in your new world.
Right.
You might be out there for the first time. Well, how do you meet people? Right. And especially if you're working from home or this remote work or something like that, you have to be able to have it inside of you to go and talk to other people, to communicate, to expand yourself, get out of your comfort zone. So networking and feeling comfortable talking with people is probably the number one thing that I would recommend after being a good human, teaching them right, wrong, manners, etiquette, those things.
So you've been interviewing young adults for your businesses for many years. Have you seen a shift in the way they communicate with you over the past 20 years? Or have they always sort of interviewed the same, if you will?
Dramatically different. Dramatically different. It is one of the most shocking things and perhaps even disturbing that I've seen. These are kids who are incredible right now. I mean, the skill sets that they have, the technology that they have, just their experience in the world is far superior than it was 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But they lack the comfort of the interpersonal skills.
Mm-hmm.
They lack the understanding of what it's like to talk to somebody. They lack the skills of a firm handshake or, this is not everyone, obviously, but we start to see enough of it where it's like we actually at our company, we've gone back to almost a boot camp of not just, they have to learn all the financial and capital market stuff that we do as our business. But the other side of it is we do dinners where you're going to learn how to have a business dinner with somebody because you might not have ever had that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how you communicate. This is how you work in a meeting. This is how you compose an email. This is how you talk to people. It's not just KK and, whatever.
IDK.
Right.
Yeah. BDW. Yeah. BTW. Yeah.
Right. So it becomes this thing. So we're actually teaching the skill sets and having to do this almost remedial training for our young analysts just to get them into the world of working and working with adults. So that's where I've seen, but once they get it, once they get through this just exposure to it, they're phenomenal. I mean, they can utilize technology better than anybody could 25 years ago. They understand it. They consume information differently. They acknowledge it, but there are some things that also they still will try. One, they hate failure, right? So we talked about that. And two, they have a false sense of comparison. They're constantly comparing everything that they do to a world that is not real, or you don't know if it's real or fake, and that's social media. If you go on any of the social media, people are very, the things that they're saying and they're talking about are, business people who are traveling around in jets and young people who, hey, I made $1 million overnight doing this. You don't know what's real, what's fake.
Right. I know my brother's in finance, and he would be interviewing candidates to work with him as well. And he said over the years, one of the things he noticed is that kids were expecting to be paid a lot more money than they were worth right at the beginning. And he would just be astounded. But I think the communication thing is a really big deal because I notice that as well. I see kids all the way up until they start college, but their ability to sort of look at you in the eye and communicate with you has really changed over the years. I'll walk into a patient's or into an exam room, and even if the kid's 15 sitting there with his mother, he doesn't say hello or look up. He's still doing his little thing on his phone, and mom starts talking. And I thought that's a huge disservice to a child. You should take the thing away and make the child talk to me. I don't want to talk about him through his mother.
Right.
So that's, just even simple things like that. But to get your kids ready to converse in the world and know how to converse in a healthy way, with adults. Let's talk about money, because money is a big one. A lot of kids go from, oh, maybe they had an allowance when they were, young or in high school, or maybe they had, a job. I'm big on getting, kids to work early and start earning some kind of money. But there are a number of kids who graduate from high school and have no idea what to do with money. I guess gone are the days when you had a checkbook. I
Yeah, right.
used to write out on my checks. But what are some of the financial basics that you think that kids should have before they leave home?
One is learn how to budget, right?
Mhm.
Showing them what a budget actually is. I actually talked to my daughters and son when I was writing this book and asked them about this stuff. It's like, do you remember this going through this? And they're like, yeah, the budget is important because you don't, unless you lay it out, you have no idea. It goes quickly, right? It's,
Yeah.
you got, it comes here and then it goes there and this, and then I had this and I had to buy this and new iPhone came out and I had to buy, like, it goes very quickly. So having a budget and understanding what it does and living by the budget is a critical skill set that they need to have. And the earlier you can introduce it, the better. The other thing too is a lot of young adults think of budgets as a punishment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to budget. Oh no, why are you making me do that? I don't want, I want to have fun. And you can. I interviewed some experts in personal finance, and each one of them said the most important thing is having some money where you can go have fun.
Mm-hmm.
But money is a lot. When you have financial freedom, that doesn't mean you're rich, but you have financial freedom, which means you sort of know what's coming in and where it's going. And you have buckets where you can spend money. Having that financial freedom will make your life so much easier. If you look at all the stress people have, it's
Mm-hmm.
typically around money, right? It's, and so if you can budget your money, you can live a great life, but knowing where it goes and prioritizing where it goes.
So how do you teach a child that who really doesn't have a job? Say they're 10 or 11 or 13, and they don't have a lot of money coming in. Maybe they just have an allowance or so forth. And you're living on a budget, but you don't necessarily want to sit down with your books and show your 13-year-old what you make and where you spend and what. So how do you teach your kids who aren't making a lot of money how to budget and where to spend their money?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's important. Well, that 10-year-old, to me, and this is, once again, this is my parenting advice. My kids do not get allowance unless you do something. Allowance is not just free money because
You're alive.
right? You're alive. I know that's,
Yeah.
that's hard, right? But you need to do something for this money. Now, I think when I was younger, a lot of times it was you had to make the decision, right? I get $10 because I did a week's of chores. I'm going to spend it, right? I'm going to go blow my money. And my mom would say, okay, well, you could, but you see this toy that you really want. Well, that's more expensive. If you just spend a little bit of it now and save some, eventually you could get that toy. So having that kind of communication with your kid, I do believe it. They need to see the benefit of it. Otherwise, it just looks like you're delaying self-gratification, and nobody wants to delay self-gratification. But if you can see the reward and show them clearly over time that they'll be able to get that reward, I think that's going to set great expectations and great learnings for them.
Mm-hmm. I wholeheartedly agree with you. As you think back to, are all of your kids launched? I assume they're all out of the home now.
I have one that's left in college. That's it.
Okay. So what do you, if you could pick out three things that were the most, put you on the spot here, the most eye-opening or disturbing questions your kids called you with after they left home, what would they be, or what would their themes be? Was it around money? Was it around relationships?
So a lot of it is money, right? So a lot of it are things that you would expect. One, do I have to fill out these tax forms?
Oh,
right?
yeah.
That was one. That was a real one. It was like, yeah, you do.
You got to pay your taxes. Yeah.
But also understand too, to that point, at this point, this is where parenting, you are allowed to come in and question and look at it. Okay, well, was this a spam, right? There's so many spams out there right now, making sure that they know what's real and what's not. So, right. Do I have to fill out these tax forms is a big one. Second one, why do I need to get a bank account? I've got Venmo, right? It's
Right.
yeah. So once again, some money ones. I think, you know, as a parent, you're never ending. It's always these questions, but a lot of them were around that. A lot of them were also getting a job, trying to find the job that was right for them. A lot of them were able to get jobs right off the bat through their college placement or something. But it's not the end all job.
Mm-hmm.
As they grow and mature, it's the location. How do I find an apartment? How do I afford an apartment? Should I have roommates? Should I have a dog? Those are things that are obviously very personal and specific questions, but they all arrange. And I think that was the key thing with this book is all the questions I've asked deal with this kind of like something that's going to be in the book, a foundational thing. Mm-hmm. Hey, my car just broke down. What do I do? Mm-hmm. Hey, let's make sure it doesn't break down. So let's walk around it first to see what triggers you. Mm-hmm. I stayed away from relationships because, quite frankly, my kids don't call me and ask me about relationships. So I can give them my 2 cents. Yeah. Back to your talking about that your patient who's sitting there with their phone. Think about this. Every father knows if somebody's coming to date their daughter, that first handshake and eye contact is a make or break.
Yes, it is.
Or a break. So it comes back to comfort with being with adults, knowing as a young child, go up, shake their hand, be firm, look at them in the eye. Yeah. That will help you out, young man, if you go to date them.
And if you shake their hand hard and you look them in the eye for longer than he's looking at you, it's a good sign for him because you've just said something very important to him. You mess with me and you mess with her, and the fact that you can't look at me is. Well, we'll think about that one. My guest has been Rob Finlay. He is a businessman, a dad of 4, and he's the author of the great book, Hey Dad, Everything You Should Have Learned About Life But Didn't. I strongly recommend people get a copy and read it. It's fun and it's very practical. And Rob, best of luck to you. Thanks so much for joining me today on Parenting Great Kids.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
I want you to know that I am so excited to be offering the PGK Insider. This is a place that I really want you to participate because we have a community here, and that is that we are all together. We're not doing this parenting journey all by ourselves. I want this to be a place where you can find solid answers, and you don't have to agree with me. That's perfectly fine. My job here is not to tell you what to do. My job is to give you solid answers so that I can help you parent your way, not my way. Just go to my website, meekerparenting.com, and sign up today. You won't be sorry.